I guess with Me Too and all this focus on men's behaviour, what's strange is how similar it feels to the 1970s.
We're, what, 40 years on from the original men's movement. The way that the women's movement and feminism has kind of given women consciousness and men need to step up and respond to it feels very, very contemporary. Feels like it could have been written yesterday.
Yeah.
So it feels like we're in the same
It is.
thing.
And it's kind of led by women coming out and finding their voice and addressing and challenging the masculine and what's sometimes called the patriarchy or patriarchal behavior or unconscious things in the male. Maybe even set or kind of kick-started a little bit by the political situation, by somebody like Trump being elected. I don't know what all the factors that bring it up right now, but I'm happy that it comes up. You know, it's great for women to really speak up and to tell the truth, and with the Me Too thing, and, you know, to not swallow it. And the level of denial that's been there for so long is really exposed right now. And what, you know, so many men have presumed is okay, it's just not okay. And so there's a real like, whoa, I've got to check myself out. That's really great. And then that brings a response from the men. But if we come back with like, oh my God, I'm this terrible person and I'm a male, and then, you know, nothing can happen. Nothing good from that space. Yeah, I am. Let me face those places inside of myself where I have those distortions, where I might be misogynistic, where I might have unconscious, you know, sexual projections onto women, and look at that. And I feel like that's what we were doing back in the 70s also, you know, that whole concept of objectifying women was completely unknown at that point. I never thought about it. Yeah, really? What? Oh yeah, God, I do that. I do that all the time, you know. What happens if I go into that and look at how I do that? Does that change how I see women and how I relate to women? Yes, it does. You know, but it's got to be owned. You know, so right now we're being called on to look again. You know, and it's not to please the women though. We have to do it for ourselves, because there's something comes up, and if there's a reaction there inside to it, it's telling us something about ourselves, and we have to do it for ourselves.
And how would you summarise the work that men need to do in the simplest possible way? Is it to really look at themselves, look at the distortions, look at the ways that, because I see it as a kind of integration, that a lot of these negative behaviours of men are disintegrated parts of the male psyche that on their own can be very dangerous, like the aggression left to itself, or rage, or any of these. Like, they are tools, and they're part of what makes, like, they're part of the male psyche, but they have to be integrated healthily within the personality. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Well, it is my observation that most of the work that men have to do on themselves has to do with getting grounded in their masculinity, and most of the work that women have to do on themselves is becoming relaxed, confident, grounded in their femininity. And then of course we have this inner polarity. I have a feminine side, a woman has a masculine side. But those sides, rather than being problematic, which they are when you're not relaxed and confident in your biological sex, become very easy to integrate, as well as the external relationships with the opposite sex. So it seems to me that and it is my experience, that the work that people need to do on themselves is to really look at, why do I not feel relaxed and confident, grounded in the masculine? And another word for that on the male side is castrated. You know, so there's a castration wound usually that keeps a man from feeling that he's really got what it takes, you know, to do the job. And so instead of being relaxed and confident, he's trying to compensate for that feeling of deficiency, and he's efforting, and that brings him up in his head, and, you know, turns him into a dickhead.
And there's a lot of talk at the moment about wanting men to be more vulnerable. Like, there's something definitely in the culture now about men being asked to open up, to be more revealing about their feelings. But it seems to me there's a kind of danger if that's not balanced by some kind of respect for the healthy masculine. which is more than just vulnerability, because that whole narrative sort of feeds into an idea that men are faulty, masculinity is faulty, there's something wrong with the masculine.
It's not helpful for a man to go to vulnerability if there's not a respect for the masculine, and to go to a kind of feminized personality type out of a feeling of guilt and shame for the masculine, what the masculine has done and what it's capable of, and all of that. There is a lot of horror shows that have happened from the masculine, undeniably, but the healing of that is not for the men to become feminine. It's for the men to grow up, embrace their masculinity, face the distortions that have been given to them by the culture and by their families, face the castration that's happened, that's taken away their confidence in their power, the personal wounding that's happened, and show up in presence. And then once in presence, vulnerability is wonderful, and it's there, and it's part of a man being in presence.
So what does that look like, and what is the work that gets us there as men?
Well, the work is more, I think, going through. One thing is that collective place that's held in the masculine where it is really distorted, and owning that, and that means facing your own personal shadow and the collective masculine shadow and the impulses towards dominance and violence and anger and all of the horror stuff that's happening in the world that comes from men. It's also inside of me. It's also inside of you. We all carry it. We've all been imprinted with it. But once we face that, and once we feel how it manifests in us, and we allow ourselves to be courageous enough to say, yeah, I'm carrying that, and I go in there and I feel it, then I'm no longer a slave to it. I'm a slave to it when it's operating from my unconscious, when it's operating out of my shadow. So it's the embracing of the distortion, it's the allowance of the strong masculine energy to come through, and the irony of it is that so many men who come to work on themselves made a decision at some point that they want to be anything but like those guys, you know, pointing to the family, pointing to the distorted men in our culture and stuff. And so they reject the masculine, and it's a kind of self-castration. You know, they want to be anything but like that. And they can feel and sense that they have that inside of them. They have the violence, they have the distortion, they have the aggression. And yet, my experience is that it's not that big. It's like it's a barrier you have to go through. And so I often take men right into that in a really strong way and encourage them to really feel and share and experience all the aggression inside, all the distortion, to own it, to feel even the tendency towards violence, the frustration that's there inside. And when they do that, they come into, you go through it and you come into a relaxed place underneath it, which is really like the roots of the masculine. You know, and that's what holds the body afterwards. But you can't get there if you don't pass through the distortion, if you don't look at your shadow, if you don't own that stuff and how it plays out in me. And I find men are very, very kind with each other when we share our shadow, when we share our distortion. It doesn't go to judgment. It's like, it's relieving. It's like, oh yeah, somebody's talking about it. Thank God.
What are the qualities of the healthy masculine?
Well, a healthy masculine, for one, is grounded. So there's this presence about a man when he's landed in his masculine, where it's relaxing to be around him in a way, because he's grounded. He's not efforting. He's not trying to be somebody. He's not coming from a place of deficiency. So there's this grounded presence that has a strong sense of discriminating intelligence, can see what's needed in a particular situation and take action, and appropriate action, without going over his own boundaries and without transgressing other people's boundaries.
When we talk about the essence of masculine and the essence of feminine, sometimes it's very easy to say, oh well, think of a quality like receptivity. Well, men should be receptive as well, or women can be strong. So when you talk about, people sometimes get a bit touchy about using the word masculine and feminine to mean certain qualities. What do you see as the essence of the masculine, for example?
Well, people do get really touchy about that, and sometimes I think that's really a pity, because They're, there's an implicit judgment in there and a defensiveness in that whole thing, you know. It's like, yes, I can be really receptive and soft in what are typically called feminine qualities, but I think in the essence and real embodiment of the masculine, it's different. It's just to say it's different than the feminine. It's absolutely equal on levels of power, absolutely equal on levels of intelligence, absolutely equal down through the whole list, but completely different. You know, and my embodiment and my expression of myself as a man is different than a woman in the feminine and her expression through the feminine and as the feminine. But does she have masculine qualities? Of course she does. And she can be as assertive, strong, and, you know, directional as I am in when she employs her masculine side. When she gets into trouble is when her masculine side is dominating the feminine consciousness and running the show. Same for me. You know, I can be, you know, as integrated into the masculine, I can very easily go into my feminine contact and touch and love and non-linear thinking, kind of poetic, artistic side. All of that can happen, but if I'm not grounded in my masculine and I'm overwhelmed by my feminine, then I come out with a kind of distorted feminine. I become kind of bitchy and moody and withdrawn and hostile and edgy and critical. I mean, it's like, ugh. It's the swampy, moody horror show for a man to be unconsciously possessed by his feminine.
That's what Jung called anima possession.
Exactly. And on the other side, there's animus possession when a woman is unconsciously possessed by her masculine side. It's difficult, you know. She'll be very judgmental, opinionated. She'll always know how things should be and have no problem telling anybody and everybody about it. And the problem, though, with animus and its judgmentalness is that it's not only directed outward to the outer world, it's also directed inward towards the woman's own femininity, and the masculine then kind of holds the feminine in a kind of captivity inside and keeps her down, which is, you know, kind of ironically it's the internalization of the exterior world situation.
And we're doing a workshop in February to give people to give men a more direct sense of some of these qualities that we're talking about. What do you hope people will get from that workshop, a weekend intensive process?
I hope that they come away feeling in love with being a man, that they're just vibrating in it, and they can feel it in their bones, they can feel it through their whole body, and they're unapologetic and unashamed, and they're connected with an authentic vein of male energy, and they don't feel afraid of other men, they feel trust in other men, they feel close with other men, they feel empowered, they feel a sense of self-esteem, and I would hope that they come out with a hint of some kind of direction and purpose, because I think that's very important for men, is to feel a sense of what do you really want, you know? And so in a way we could say this would be kind of like going to the roots of the masculine. I want them to have an embodied experience, because when it's really embodied and you feel it, there's just no denying it, you know, and it's unforgettable.